Okay, everyone, we're going to get started again. Our next topic is going to be, should I say it before or not?
Just make a run.
Okay. No, our next topic is going to be training from DCJS. Our speaker is going to be Harvey Powers, the Director of the Division of Law Enforcement for DCJS. Harvey is a 25-year veteran of the Richmond, Virginia Police Department, serving there until he retired in May of 2018. For the last 5 years of his Richmond career, he was the director of the Richmond Police Training Academy. In addition to his role in the Richmond Police Department, Captain Powers served for 8 years as the regional leader of the fundraiser for the Law Enforcement Torch Run to benefit Special Olympics. For the past 5 years, he has instructed the fair and impartial policing, teaching nationally on subjects of importance to law enforcement. Harvey Powers holds an undergraduate degree from James Madison University in both psychology and history, and has done graduate work in community agency counseling and accounting. He is a graduate of PERF's Senior Management Institute of Police and Professional Executive Leadership School. Currently, he is the Director of Law Enforcement Services for the Department of Criminal Justice Service in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In this capacity, he manages police training and decertification for 20,000 police officers in the state. Welcome, Mr. Powers.
Nothing will quite clear a room out like telling folks DCJS is going to talk. Wow, a lot of empty chairs. So before I talk a little bit about DCJS, we have obviously a new director, Jackson Miller, and a new deputy director at DCJS, and that's Tracy Banks. I'm going to introduce her, let her say her hellos, and then I'll get back to some of the brass tacks. I will warn you, though, she drove here and hung out with Sheriff Brad Nunnally, so her judgment of character clearly is in question at this point. So I'll allow her to say a few things.
This is where I wanted to be the entire conference. No, I'm kidding. I do want to say thank you to Sheriff Nunnally. He's been an excellent host, and I just wanted to say hello to you guys. And I promised myself I wouldn't get teary-eyed, but I may. Because when I talk to law enforcement, and I'm very pro-law enforcement, and so is the administration, I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. As important as my work is, I'm not putting my life on the line every day. And so I just want to say thank you. I wanted to just give you our greetings. Now, the next thing I want to say is, Sharon, thank you for the joke. We're from the government, and we're here to help. No. But anyway, what I want to say is that Harvey's going to represent us well. But if any of you ever have a question or want to get in touch with us, please, my door is open. Sheriff Nunnally and Seraphus? Yes, that's a hard name for me. They have been consented to basically field requests from the sheriff, so we have somebody that, one of your own, so we can get some solutions. And I told them that I didn't want to have a flowery speech. I want to get work done, and so I'm hoping we can work together. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. We're going to run through about 2 or 3 hours worth of material in about 30 minutes. It's okay, deep breath. We're going to get through this together, all right? Marcus alert. The last time I joined you folks, I recovered several bruises on my body from things that were heavy thrown at me on the topic of Marcus alert. The bottom line on Marcus alert is legislation coming out of the most recent session has dramatically changed this, and the bottom line on it is that if you, according to the 2020 census, have 40,000 or less in your jurisdiction, your participation in this from a law enforcement perspective is optional. Now, I will tell you, if you decide not to participate in Marcus Alert type activities, there will be something from DCJS we are required by the legislation. Again, we are going to comply with direction from legislation that says we need to put together a working group and understand why you chose not to participate. I think we all know the reasons: funding, staffing, lack of resources to execute on Marcus Alert type of priorities, but the bottom line is we're going to have to put something together to be responsive to the legislation. The key on all of this is to remember that out of the 133 counties and cities within Virginia, about 67% meet this 40,000 person criteria. So a substantial number of jurisdictions are going to have the option of not participating in this. So we're going to talk about, like I said earlier, we have a working group that will analyze why agencies chose not to participate in Marcus Alert, and the work on this is mandated by legislation as well. Another topic of concern that we get lots of questions about is decertification. As you know, the special session of 2020 expanded decertification and broadened the criteria which a certified law enforcement or certified jail officer could be decertified. The bottom three items are the key additions that came out of that special session. A couple of key things to point out. Violation of state or federal law. It does not say a conviction of state or federal law. It says a violation. So if the agency confirms or believes it to be that a violation took place, that meets the threshold. The green one there, that's basically your Brady violations. Any violation that causes them to be terminated or resigns. So let's say somebody commits an act, but you choose not to terminate them on that, or they do not resign because of that, then it does not meet the grounds for decertification. It's only the termination or resignation that activates that. We have seen a dramatic, I'll show you the numbers in a minute, we have seen a dramatic increase in decertifications as one would expect on this, and most of them fall from that green line right there, coming to the truthfulness issue. Last one, misconduct as defined by the Standards of Conduct Committee. The Standards of Conduct Committee has met several times virtually. We will have what we believe to be one more meeting. John Bamberger is our lead on the decertification and standards of conduct. He's with us here along with part of his team. We believe that one more meeting and we'll get that firmed up. Let's see, is Major Heatley here? I think I saw him. Yep, there we go. Major Heatley is on that Standards of Conduct Committee and has represented you guys very well on that. There has been a lot of good back and forth on that. But as it stands now, that Standards of Conduct needs to be completed. We will complete it and get it entered into regulation. By the numbers, 19, we had 6 decertifications in the Commonwealth. 2020, we had 19. 2021, the first year that decertification changes became active, we had 58, with 4 of them reinstated on appeal. So far this year, we have about 30 submissions so far. We've got 20 of them moving through. Others are in various stages of background to see if they meet the statutory requirements. The key thing I want to point out on decertification is that we have seen a profound increase in FOIA requests surrounding decertification submissions. If you are going to notify DCJS that somebody in your agency you believe meets the criteria and you're reporting them for decertification, do not send us the complete internal affairs packet, okay? If you can reach out to this email address, it's lejdcert@dcjs.virginia.gov. That goes straight to John and his team, and they will help you navigate this question. Does your person meet the grounds for decertification? So rather than send us massive amounts of documentation that might at some point be subject to FOIA, we just need to get some of the bare bones. There's a form online on the DCJS website that's a check-the-box thing. It can't get any easier. So you take that form, you fill out that information. We really shouldn't need much more information other than to confirm it. Basic training objectives. We have been in the process for a while now on rewriting the training objectives, the basic training objectives for law enforcement certification. Their academy classes, essentially. It was passed through this past December, the CJSB, and it is now in town hall taking public comment and that sort of thing. There is a lot of changes that are potentially underway with this. I think the key one is that field training for certified law enforcement will go from a minimum of 100 hours to a minimum of 240 hours. That's based on the recommendation of the Curriculum Review Committee. That is not DCJS's recommendation. That was a recommendation that came from the Curriculum Review Committee. There are a number of other things, including the addition of a new category on officer wellness that will be added to training as well. Along that, let's see if I can go back. Along the same lines on basic training, we will be conducting uniform lesson plans. We were mandated out of the special session of 2020 to provide uniform lesson plans for basic law enforcement and in-service law enforcement training as well. From the basic training, we have released an RFP, and we have finally completed executing that RFP with Force Concepts, who will be writing basic lesson plans for certified law enforcement for all academies, that's independent and regional academies in the Commonwealth. So we used to just give academies objectives, and they developed their own lesson plans, and so you had 39 different academies in the state with 39 different lesson plans to meet the same objectives. We will be providing those lesson plans, although if your academy doesn't wish to use those, there's a waiver process so that you can use your own to meet those objectives if you so fit. We are on an 18-month timeline, so we should see something in late 2023 where all of those lesson plans will be completed. For in-service training, we were mandated to cover certain topics with lesson plans as well. We have convened work groups that are working to develop lesson plans for all of those topics. Again, there are waivers if your agency meets the criteria and would like to deliver. We can work with you on that. And then advanced training, we are working with CIT Virginia on a number of different advanced trainings as well to provide uniform lesson plans throughout the Commonwealth. As you notice, there's lots of subject matter experts on this. Dr. Narrows is our subject matter for lesson plans, and she's available at that email address if you have questions about the process as well. Tracer. Tracer. I hope most of you have not had bad experiences with Tracer, but I fear that not to be the case. T-Rex is dead. T-Rex, the dinosaur, no joke intended, is no longer with us. In October, we flipped the switch and turned Tracer on. Tracer is infinitely better and newer, but the data we transferred from T-Rex into Tracer was so old and so corrupted, it created a lot more problems than we anticipated, frankly. And the bottom line is that DCJS does not have the computer testing staff that you would find in a Microsoft or Apple. We have been working through the bugs that we have had with Tracer. Our data migration did not go as well as we would have liked, and we are currently still fixing problems connected to that. We have new reports and new options coming with Tracer, and one of the great things is we hope to get rid of the age-old Scantron test. Those of you that took certification exams on Scantron, we're still using Scantron in 2022. Can you believe that? One of the big things we want to see Tracer do is go to online testing so that we can give immediate results and we don't have to take the Scantron sheets back and scan them and then let you know in a few days who passed the test and who didn't. There are a number of updates to Tracer coming out. Our two in-house experts on Tracer are Amy Sink and Frank Pitzer. Their contact information is right there in front of you if you want to take a picture of that. If you have Tracer issues or questions, we're glad to work with you on it. We still have a lot of bugs on the board we're working through, but most of them are not systemic to everybody. They're more individualized. As far as grants and funding goes, I'd love to be able to tell you. I was slow to John, I'm sorry, and Elizabeth. I should have gotten you this presentation. Their deadline was 2 weeks ago, and I said, please, can I hold on to this? I think they might pass a budget. And then I can tell folks how much money is, nope, they haven't passed a budget yet. I can't tell you how much money is going to be coming to local law enforcement right now. So we have our team in the grants coordination. They get money out the door to localities. But as soon as we have a final budget, we'll be able to know what the future looks like for those grants. We do feel like there's a substantial money coming into the system. We are currently handling burn JAG grants, just under about $3.5 million. Lowly is about $400,000. CESF is coronavirus emergency funding. We have 116 awards at about $4.1 million on that. Other programs, body-worn cameras and so forth. There's a ton of grants out there. If you are interested in grant opportunities, there is a mechanism on the DCJS website to sign up for updates. Okay? If you go to the DCJS website, you can get updates of when these grants are going to be put out there. If you don't do that and you would like to call me and say, hey, are the grants ready yet? Feel free. But the bottom line is we will be pushing out a lot of grants, we hope, in the near term as soon as the budget gets finalized. DCJS touches a number of public safety agencies. That's a rundown right there of what that looks like. And right now there's 40,000 public safety professionals that we have some level of oversight with as well. Right now, part of our oversight is with our field reps. This is how they're distributed throughout the state. I have the director of our field reps, Sharon Gray, is here, along with Michael Coker, who handles part of the Eastern Shore and in the Tidewater region as well. So we have a lot of folks that are available to help answer questions and try to make sure things are going in the correct direction. Looking forward, there are a number of things going forward that we want to look at. Number one, Senate Bill 17, which has been amended by the governor and looks to come into activation, I guess, or it's going to become law soon, we believe. Basically, if you are retired from law enforcement and are actively drawing retirement, if you're retired and you are less than 5 years from separation, you can come back with 0 training requirements. Okay, so now I'm not speaking to how that impacts state retirement and if you went from one state agency to other state agencies, but if you can find folks that came from other types of systems, like I came from Richmond, which has its own retirement system, it could impact differently. Funding to local law enforcement, as I've said a number of times up here, we are still standing by for finalization on the budget to know how that's going to impact finances. VSI, Todd Klingenpeel, raise your hand. Todd Klingenpeel, we stole him from the Salem Sheriff's Department. The sheriff there is still mad at me. He is our coordinator for VSI right now. Accreditation from the state level. There's a lot of good reasons to go with the state for accreditation. And we have over 100 agencies in the Commonwealth that have Virginia law enforcement or other public safety certification. One of the things we believe that the size of VSI has been that it would warrant much greater investment by the state, and I believe that's going to be happening. So if with more investment from the state, more resources, we can do a better job at helping smaller agencies achieve accreditation. If that's something you wish to do and you want to make that a reality, Todd's the guy to talk to and on the steps you need to take to make that executed. We would like to see us and DCJS be able to offer more technical assistance to make that happen. That's my contact information. If you have any questions or issues, my email address as well. I didn't recognize my whole DCJS crew over in the corner. We're sitting with our backs against the wall because we know how warmly folks in law enforcement love DCJS. So if you ever have any questions or if you want to catch us before we get out of here, please feel free to do that. I want to just give you a window into the future on where some of our priorities lay for the coming year. We are going to be reviewing a lot of the antiquated regulations that we have in code right now, specifically a couple of them that are first front and center. The changing of the regulation for online law enforcement training to make that something that we can work with you guys on to make sure that some of the training for local certified law enforcement, certified sheriff's deputies would be able to be done online. There's wide acceptance in changing the time frame to achieve certification for law enforcement from 12 months to 18 months. We're looking at that. The increases in field training hours, the increases in classroom hours for the academy, the state certification, you put all that together, there's been a dramatic increase on the training requirements. We need to make a commensurate time adjustment as well. So we're looking at options and trying to make that happen as quickly as possible. We are committed to expediting the process for out-of-state law enforcement to come into Virginia with a reasonable amount of time and get them as quickly as possible into position. All right? Many folks in this room are very close to border locations, whether it's North Carolina, West Virginia, Maryland. There are lots of places that we have certified law enforcement that have retired from one state and that would gladly join your operation if the training requirement was maybe a little easier to navigate. So we're committed to doing that and trying to find simpler ways to making sure that if people are coming from out of state, we can execute on that quickly. We are watching carefully, as I said, the amount of funding coming out of the budget that we're supposed to pass through to local law enforcement, and we're very careful on the wording in the budget language. If it says that they have to be given out via grants, then that means competitive grants, which means grant writing and grant monitoring. So be very careful and pay attention to how those monies seem to be focused out from the budget language. We'll make sure we're clear on that. Is it just money we're supposed to hand out to agencies, or is it going to be a competitive grant process? We have to be compliant with the law on that. And just one last thing, we have been directed to review and conduct a job task analysis for jails, courts, and civil process for a curriculum review committee that's going to be reviewing the training objectives for those tasks as well, those positions within public safety in the Commonwealth. So we're going to be conducting those job task analysis in the coming weeks. Some of you may have already received emails to ask for feedback, and we're going to be reaching out to folks to tell us about where trainings for those tasks need to be changed, evolved, maybe even reduced. Wow, that's 20 minutes or less, or your next one's free. All right, so 20 minutes, folks. I got a couple of minutes. Otherwise, I'll let the auditor talk. I don't know who's more warmly received around here, you or me. So any questions for DCJS you want me to handle real quick? Okay, so the question, if I understand it, a way to check applicants about decertification? All right, so there are many different ways. Anybody decertified in the Commonwealth, there's a National Decertification Index, and we can assist you with, we submit to the National Decertification Index, right, John? And you can also reach out to that email address if you have any question about an applicant and the condition with which they left their prior employment. Please do remember there was a code passed out of the special session that required if you're hiring anybody that was previously certified in the Commonwealth, you have to do a background check and find out about what circumstances they left under. And the other agency has to provide it for you. Yes, sir. Oh.
On the Marcus alert, question for you. I mean, we're involved in a cross-systems mapping, and I know it's going to take years in order to get that program up and running the way it's supposed to, co-responders and all. The problem that we're going to have, we don't have a very assertive mental health group in Loudoun County, or mental health folks, and I just don't know where they're going to get the funding. They can't keep the positions that they have. That's a legal requirement. Is there going to be any state funding that's going to help get mental health professionals that can actually ride with the law enforcement people on these calls?
So your question is about co-responder teams and
Right.
funding that. As of right now, I have not seen any indication that there is specified funding set aside for that specific task. I know there's a number of DBHDS, and the conversations I've had with DBHDS have said they've got some money that they're trying to pull out that way, but through DCJS, I haven't seen any funding to meet that. Now, one of the things that we may do, depending on the prescriptions on monies that come to us out of the current budget, there may be some opportunity on that. If you'll please reach out to me via email and just make sure I can have a contact information. I'll circle around with you and make sure we close the loop on that if there is anything else that comes out of that budget movement.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I apologize for getting up again, but there's something I got to ask you. You got a lot of experience in this room. Can you utilize some of the sheriffs on these committees that you're forming and not having just DCJS personnel?
Harvey, let me take that one, if
Pardon?
you don't mind. I was just going to mention that we are trying to put together, at least my desire is to put together focus groups of sheriffs, because we love law enforcement and we want to have, like you said, the benefit of all of your experience. So I've asked, and Harvey, this is not something that we're doing through the division, but I wanted to know what people think about DCJS that are outside the organization at your level, if you will. And so Sheriff Nunnally and Brad, can y'all wave, you guys? Okay, there he is in surface. Yeah, there he is, trying to fade into the background. But anyway, if you're interested in having a role in this and you want to join us, because it is us, if you will, then please talk to those guys or talk to us individually. Give us your business card. We want to utilize all of the brain power that's in this room.
All right, thank you.
And I will say that every time we put together a board of any kind or any panel, one of the things we make sure we have representation from is some sort of sheriff's representation on that as well. And all of the things that we're doing with the training, absolutely, we're looking to the regional academies to recommend folks that are subject matter experts on those in-service training requirements as well.
All right. Now, is it possible to go back to the decertification slide that you had up there?
I can press buttons. I'll see if that works. Nope. I broke the computer. It's not my first time.
All right. There was one thing on there about somebody. Let me see if we can't get it up here.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep. One more. There you go.
That's it.
All
That's
right.
it. The one that's in green, officers terminated or resigns as an act while in the performance of his duties that compromise the officer's credibility, integrity, honesty, and characteristics that constitutes exculpatory impeachment evidence in a criminal case. Exculpatory evidence isn't bad evidence. It's just innocence that tends to prove maybe somebody didn't commit the crime. But is there a statutory definition for all that stuff?
John is my subject. Is there statutory definition for all of that stuff? I don't know if you heard him, Sheriff. He said we're using pretty much the verbiage as it stands there. Most of what we're seeing is basically lying in an IA investigation or something along those lines.
All right. The one in red says officer engaged in serious misconduct as defined in the statewide performance standards of conduct.
Yes, sir.
I've never seen that. Where is it?
All right, so the Standards of Conduct Committee, as I said, the committee is still working on that. We believe one final meeting on that. We should have a final draft to submit to the Criminal Justice Services Board as we were directed to do by code. And then once that happens, it'll then be entered into regulation.
All right. One more question, please.
Sure.
If a sheriff contemplates these differently than you do, is there a process of appeal for the officer or?
Absolutely. And actually, the Executive Committee of the Criminal Justice Services Board hears appeals. I've been impressed with the due process on that. There's been a number of appeals that have been levied in there that the officers or sheriffs have successfully appealed the decertification and been reinstated. And if that is unsuccessful, the next step would be circuit court. Yeah, circuit court.
Okay. All right. But it's an administrative hearing, so it's just on the authority of the jurisdiction to hear the matter. It's an administrative case, correct?
It's an administrative hearing that's done through the Executive Committee of the Criminal Justice Services Board. Yes, sir.
All right. And then I'd like to make a final comment. I just ran for re-election and got elected, but I had this guy that ran against me. He was a former state trooper who got in trouble. His captain was going to fire him. He broke into his captain's office, stole the report, and shredded it so that it couldn't be used against him. I guess he didn't think that there were computers that had copies on it. But he was fired from the state police. And he sued and went into court, circuit court in Virginia Beach, went up to Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, then it went to the U.S. District Court and then the U.S. Court of Appeals, and he was fired for cause. And yet at the Court of Appeals, at the federal level, he changed, the department allowed him to resign. And so all this stuff has been done, but he was still allowed to run and hold himself out as a state trooper that had resigned. And when did these laws go into effect?
So the items that are in black and white there, those predate November of 2020 in the special session. The three bottom items went into effect May 2021, right? May 1st, 2021. Yeah.
Well, his DCJS record now reflects that he resigned instead of terminated.
Say that again.
His DCJS record reflects that he's allowed to resign instead of terminated.
I tell you what, Sheriff, I don't know what this specific case, but I'd be glad to talk to you about it and get that information and figure out how his record reflects that.
Not that I hold any grudges, but it just pissed me off a little bit.
Clearly. Oh, I clearly, not at all. No, sir. I
do have one question.
Yes, sir.
The blue line.
Yes, sir.
Terminated or resigned in violation of state or federal law. The top lines, you're talking about being convicted. Do they have to be convicted?
Yeah, the blue line on that decertification does not, violation of state or federal law. It does not say conviction. And that's how it reads in the code.
So if I had somebody who was charged with a crime but not convicted yet, then they need to be decertified.
You would, if you believe they committed that crime and they have either been terminated or resigned, then you would submit for a decertification. We have actually seen a number of cases. Eric, I'm right. A number of cases have come through where the court case has not been completed. It's still on appeal. And the executive committee to whom they've appealed have deferred action on that pending the outcome of the actual case.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Say again? We need to ignore that? You'd like me to? Okay. Duly noted, sir. All right. Well, I appreciate your time, folks, and I'll turn it over to the rest of the folks here. Thank you for your time.
All right, next on the agenda is the Auditor of Public Accounts, Accounting and Auditing Issues for Sheriffs, Ms. Lori Hicks. Lori Hicks is the Audit Director for Local Government and Judicial Systems Specialty Team with the Auditor of Public Accounts. She has a BS in Criminal Justice from Old Dominion University and a BS in Accounting from Christopher Newport University. She is both a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner. Lori has been an auditor for 21 years. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just fun fact about me, many, well, I won't say another many, years ago, I was a deputy sheriff.
That's what John just told me.
Yes, I was a deputy sheriff, and I was working in the jail, and at some point I got put in charge of the inmates' money. And when I got audited, I was fascinated by the process, and I, in my sick mind, said, I want to do what they're doing. So I had a little career change. So I have a very good appreciation and understanding of what you all do and the challenges you face, and definitely appreciate all of you. So just hang in there with me. I know people don't like to talk about accounting and auditing topics, but I'm just kind of a quick overview for you. Sorry, I'm not able to see over the podium. So anyway, I'm going to give you an overview of the APA, just basically who we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Virginia Sheriff's Manual. That's something that a lot of people don't know that's out there. It's a resource we put out, so I'm going to tell you where it is and what kind of stuff you can find in it. I'm going to talk about the APA's role in auditing sheriffs. We have kind of a dual role in that. One involves local CPA firms that are auditing localities, and the other involves us actually coming out and doing audits as well. I'm going to talk about typical audit findings and also a couple of miscellaneous reporting requirements that sometimes get overlooked. So who are we? The APA, the current APA is Stacy Henshaw. That's an appointed position, and she reports to JLARC. We are in the legislative branch of government so that we can be an independent external auditor for the executive branch agencies and judicial branch agencies. The biggest project that we do is that we audit the state's annual financial report. But we do other things as well. We audit all the state agencies. We audit public colleges and universities. I head up a team one arm of the team is 9 auditors, spread out across the state, and we audit courts and constitutional officers, which includes the sheriff. We also have some local government stuff that we do in terms of monitoring localities for fiscal distress and, putting out specifications for CPA firms, doing locality audits, and we also do quality control reviews over their work. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. Now, the Virginia Sheriff's Accounting Manual, like I said, some people didn't even realize it existed. It has a lot of information in it. As you can see, it touches on a lot, probably most of the funds that Sheriff's Office would be touching. It lives on our website. It's kind of hard to find. You have to drill down a little bit. So if you ever get on there and can't find it, just email me. I'll send you a PDF copy, no problem. But it talks about, it references codes and regulations related to all of these kinds of funds, and then it also gives best practices for handling them. So it really is a good resource. It's pretty comprehensive, and we update it every year. And it's got, as you can see, canteen funds, inmate funds, medical co-payments, that kind of thing. So lots of information. So auditing sheriffs. So the localities all have to contract with a CPA firm in order for them to come and audit their financial statements every year. So Virginia has some things in particular that we want those CPA firms to actually look at in addition to the financial statements. So we write specifications, kind of a to-do list, if you will, for those CPA firms and say, hey, we want you to do this too while you're out there opining on the financial statements. So there's a section on sheriffs. What we pretty much ask them to do is identify all the sources of funds that the sheriff is holding and determine if there's specific controls and procedures in place to make sure the money is being safeguarded, that that the sheriff is following the best practices set out in the Virginia Sheriff's Accounting Manual. That there's some code sections that they're required to kind of look at, make sure the sheriff is following. So they come out and they do that, and mostly I think they're focused on like the canteen funds, the inmate funds, medical co-payments, that kind of thing. They're required to report to us any of their findings, and so we get those every year. Now, when we come out, we're looking at just state funds only. So for sheriffs, and when we come out and do these audits, we're doing all of the constitutional officers in the locality that handle state funds. So for the sheriffs, what we're looking at are sheriff's civil process fees, and we're looking at commissions on sheriff sales. So what we do is we pretty much trace all of the fees that come in from the time it hits the front door to the sheriff's bank account. If he or she has one, then remittance over to the local treasurer, and then on the treasurer's end of the audit, we trace that money out to the state treasurer. So we follow all of that stuff all the way through. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at bank statements, we're going to look at deposit slips, we're going to look at receipt books, that type of thing. And what we typically do before the audits, and I would say May, June timeframe, we send out a questionnaire to the sheriff or whatever contact we have for the sheriff, and with just some questions about how do you handle sheriff's fees, do you have a bank account, who does the bank deposits, who does the reconciliations, just to help us understand what the process is and what your procedures are before we come in and actually do our work. And our audits typically don't take very long. I mean, I've gone in and 30 minutes later I'm done. So it's not a huge ordeal. As I said, we trace the sheriff's remittances to treasurer's records, and we review deposits and remittances. We look at bank reconciliations, and I want to say something about bank reconciliations. I know a lot of people think, what's the big deal? I mean, why do we have to have bank reconciliation and somebody reviewing it? And the thing is, I'll give you an example of something that's been going on recently. We've had courts all across the state who have had, bad actors get a hold of one of their checks, maybe something they sent out for restitution payment or for a bond refund. They've been duplicating these checks and, cashing them, or they've been taking the account number and routing number off of the checks and paying their bills online with them. Now, some people might say, what idiot would do this to a court? We all know, sitting in this room, that there's some stupid criminals. So I don't know. I'm just saying, they can wreak havoc. So when you review your banking activity and do your bank reconciliation at the end of the month and have a second set of eyes go over it, you can catch things like that quickly. And that's really the big thing. You can't always prevent things from happening, but you can catch them and deal with them quickly. Some of our common audit findings are about depositing and remitting sheriff's fees promptly. Again, like I said, the bank reconciliation and having a monthly review process. Honestly, if you're a person who handles any money, any funds, and you're a person who maybe does bank reconciliations or anything like that, you want a second set of eyes on your work as a protection for you. So, and then that second set of eyes is also good because it catches any mistakes that you might make, but definitely as a protection for you, because you don't want anybody to say, hey, this guy's been doing this and that. No, we've got it all above board. We've done the reconciliation. Somebody has looked at it. Everything's good. One of the other common audit findings is obtaining an appropriation before spending funds, forfeit property not going to DCJS, missing documentation for small purchase charge card transactions, and I think a big one is missing inmate signatures for trust fund disbursements and medical co-payments and things like that. And I know in the jail, I mean, you're trying to get the guys to sit call. You're trying to get you're out with the trustee trying to deliver canteen. You don't want anybody bothering you about a darn signature, but it does matter. It really does matter. I have as a matter of fact, there's a passage out of the Sheriff's Accounting Manual that I want to read because I think it kind of explains why these things are so important. It says, the sheriff is a public official who is essentially always on duty. Therefore, any funds that the sheriff handles carry the presumption that they are public funds. Further, any money coming into the sheriff's custody, other than a paycheck or personal funds, carries with it the overriding assumption that the sheriff is the fiduciary custodian and is holding the money for someone else. So it kind of gives you another perspective. Just think about what would happen if, heaven forbid, something happened with any of the funds and the public found out. We don't want your sheriff to be that sheriff. Okay, so just a couple more things and I'll be quiet. There's a couple of reporting requirements people sometimes forget. One is the fraud reporting. If the sheriff has a reasonable suspicion that one of his or her employees have, mishandled, they have committed fraud, embezzlement, that type of thing, they're supposed to notify our office, the Office of the State Inspector General, and the Superintendent of the State Police. If ever I can help you in that process, that's fine. A lot of times people will call me and say, hey, we had this happen, what do we do? And I can kind of walk you through what you need to do with that. And, it's interesting because we do see a fair amount of fraud at the local level. I'm not necessarily talking about sheriff's offices, but we do see a lot of fraud at the local level. And if those employees, what blows my mind is if those employees are convicted of a felony from what they did in the course of their duties, they can lose their VRS. And I think a lot of them don't think about that. And when you look at some of the amounts of money that gets stolen, it's small amounts considering what the impact and ramification is. So I always find that kind of interesting. Okay, the other reporting requirement is the statement of financial condition. We sometimes call it statement of accountability. So every year the sheriff has to send to our office, it's a sworn statement of this is the amount of money, this is the snapshot of the amount of money that the sheriff is holding at June 30th. And we're talking about state and local funds with that, but it's the money that the sheriff is actually holding, not the money that the treasurer may be holding on the sheriff's behalf. The treasurer has to do their own report, and we get that information from them. So that's what we have to get from you all, or from the sheriff. What we do is we send out a reminder in June or so. We try to do all this stuff in June so it's not too long before you have to, you'll forget about it. But we send a reminder and a template that the sheriff can use to fill out the information. And there's also in the workbook, there's like 3 or 4 tabs, and we have some instructions and frequently asked questions and that kind of thing. But those emails typically come from me. I usually answer and field all the questions on those. So anytime you have questions, feel free to reach out. My contact information, should you have any questions about anything, the things I talked about today, or anything you may run into related to accounting or auditing, just feel free, definitely feel free to give me a call. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. All right, that ends the general session of the program. So this afternoon, we need to have members only stay in for our general membership meeting. So anybody that's not an actual member, if they could please exit.